Lots of comments on these verses. הבאתי את זרעך ככוכבי השמיים, ונתתי לזרעך את כל ארצות האל. And I will make numerous your offspring. And this is really a big word for numerous, like making them into myriads and beyond, right? I will make them rav, your seed, literally, like the stars of the sky. And I will give to your seed all of these lands. The Hitpael, and they will bless themselves, the za'acha, by means of your seed. Kol goyei haaretz, all the nations of the land, or so this could be interpreted the world, right? So let's look at this. Bless. Rabbi Yosef Bar Tuvia comments that through your descendants, all the nations of the world will receive genetic input. So it's interesting. So he's making this claim that there will be the seed of Israel everywhere, right? That everybody's going to have some of this. And it's possible that this could have happened because we don't know where 9 of the tribes are, right? We really only know where 3 are. We've got Judah, we've got Levi, and we've got Menasheh. Now, there also might be some of those tribes, maybe some people lived in Judah, for example, right? So you might have a little bit of Benjamin somewhere, but nobody knows who it is. And there might be some Shimon, but again, nobody knows. Predominantly, it's Judah and Levi today, with a little bit of Menasheh. From India, they found Menasheh, right? The other 9 tribes, who knows? Who knows where they are? By means of your offspring. So Hitpael expresses the Hitpael binyan, which usually expresses a reflexive action, right? To do to oneself, right? So if the verbal root is to kill, you put Hitpael, it means to kill oneself. It could also be rendered as wish a blessing on one another. Halot claims, this is a big, nice lexicon, that it can be rendered the same as nifal, the passive binyan. Be blessed. There is no agreement, though, with DCH, another nice big lexicon. This is a 9-volume one. And BDB presents it as the other way. Nifal renders like Hitpael for this root. So there's some confusion over what's happening and disagreement among the major lexicons. So it's good in those instances to look to see what the sages say. Achotiy. Okay, sorry, we're not there yet. Okay, I need to make sure I finish on time. So let's just read. Eikev asher shama Avraham bekoli. Eikev. Again, this is that word about the heel, right? So it's kind of interesting that this word is used here. And I don't know if you remember when we did the yearly Joshua, the last time when we were on the parsha about Eikev, this means like a result or a reward because of such and such, right? So because of that which, how Abraham had obeyed me. Literally, Shema Abraham Bekoli, he listened to my voice. And we say he obeyed me. Vayishmor mishmarti mitzvotai chukotai utoratai. And he safeguarded my mishmeret. Mishmeret is like the watches, right? Like the watches, even in the night, right? It's meaning he's very careful to protect the obligations, right? Mitzvotai, my commandments. Chukotai, my statutes or my precepts, v'toratai, and my laws or my Torahs. Verse 6, Vayeshev Yitschaq b'Gerar. So Yitzchak dwelled in Gerar. Verse 7, V'yisha'alu anshei hamakom leishto, vayomer achotiy, ki yarei le'emor ishti pen yahargumi, anshei hamakom al Rivqah ki tovat mar'ehi. When the men of the place inquired about his wife, he said, she's my sister. For he was afraid to say, my wife. And now it's interesting, it changes here. There's like a missing word. It just says lest. So it's now him talking. Lest they slay me, the men of this region slay me, on account of Rivqah. For she is very good looking. Literally, she's a good sight. The same word here, mareh, it's used as a vision, right? The prophet can see a chizayon or he can see a mareh, right? A vision, a sight. So she's my sister. Abarbanel comments, that is my relative. He was not lying. And this is a very interesting point. So there's different ways that the words for siblings can be used in Hebrew. Avimelekh uses this word, even referring to Abraham as an ach. And we find that this was common in treaties between Semitic peoples or Semitic speakers. Right? In the treaty, they would refer to their allies sometimes as brothers. That's a bit much. Normally in Hebrew, it can mean a relative, right? Like we see this used with Lot when Abraham is speaking to Lot. Lot certainly is not Abraham's brother; he's his nephew, but he still says Achim anachnu. We are literally brothers, but we are relatives, is what he's saying. We're kinsmen. So you should understand that the word ach doesn't just mean brother, and the word achot doesn't just mean sister. Right? Literally, if you're hyperliteral, yes, but has this broader meaning as being kin. And so, what Abarbanel is cleverly pointing out, and I love that he says this, because we do see later when we get to a part where Yaakov Avinu, when he's keeping the commandment that his mother told him to do to trick the father, he's still very careful to not trick him. To try to tell the truth. He's very careful, and we'll see this in next week's parasha. So it's really something else. We see that this was part of his character, that he did not want to lie. Even if he had to, he wanted to technically tell the truth, even if the person was misled, right? So he said, she's my relative. But that's true. She's his relative. She's his wife. This praise where she's good looking. Chizquni has an interesting comment. He says she's beautiful, but because she had borne children, she was no longer, as 24:16 calls her, very beautiful. The sages, they're thinking about it. They're processing the text. All right, continuing on. Vahiki arachulo sham hayamim vayashkeif Avimelekh melech Plishtim ve'ad hachalom vayar v'hinei Yitzhak mitsacheq eit Rivqah ishto. So it happened one time that when the days were long, is really what it means. They lengthened for him the days. So it means he's been there a long time. That Abimelekh, he looks down, the king of the Philistines looks down from his window. And he saw, and look, Yitzchak is fondling Rivqah, his wife. Right? So, he knows he's not his sister. Right? Because he also recognizes he's an Ishtam. He's not going to be like doing something weird with his sister. This is the same word that Yishma'el was doing with Yitzchak, even according to the Septuagint, when Sarah saw them. Mitsacheq. It was mitsacheq. So this is the reason that some of the sages interpret that Yitzchak was being molested by Yishma'el, because the word is mitsacheq. Now the word can mean other things. It can just mean playing, right? It can mean laughing, right? So this is not a sure thing, but they form a Gezerah Shava with this verse, which is, for those of you who are new, this is a linguistic connection, right? The sages believe because the Bible is divinely inspired and the words are holy, that when you have a similar phrase in the Hebrew in different locations, that there is a connected lesson between those two places. Okay, any comments or questions? Okay, so Dr. Vera asked, where were Yaakov and Esau during this time? So, yeah, so they they would have gone with their father, right? So they would be with their father still. Oh, you mean while he's fondling? Who knows? Esau probably out hunting, and Yaakov probably at home studying. I mean, if we had to make an educated guess, that would be my guess, right? And also you have to ask, why is he doing outside Avimelech's window? So it must be that Avimelech put him up in some kind of nice room near to him, probably out of gratitude for his wife. So looks out and sees it. Chapter 26, verse 9. Oh wait, we translated all the stuff, right? Hold on. Yeah, okay. Make sure. Okay, yeah, those chapter 26, verse 8. Okay, here we are, verse 9. ויקרא אבימלך ליצחק ויאמר הנה אשתך היא ואיך אמרת אחותי היא ויאמר אליו יצחק כי אמרתי פן אמות עליה. Then Avimelekh summoned Yitzhak, and he said, Hello? Hello? Look, it's your wife. She's your wife. So how is it that you said to me, achotiy, she's my sister? And Yitzchak said to him, because I said, lest I die on her account. Right? So I don't die on her account. So on this, Eich Amarta, Timchi comments that the Avimelekh mentioned in our chapter here was not the same one that lived in the days of Abraham. You get that? So Chizquni said it was, but Kimchi says it's not. So, so yeah, when you guys ask me, is it the same Abimelech? Unknown. It depends who you talk to. Had he been the same, it is inconceivable that he could have asked Yitzchak such a question. Right? I mean, didn't he learn his lesson? I mean, I guess he's just really, really dumb. So he had, after all, had experience with Sarah and Abraham concerning the same subject. The kings of the Philistines generally assume the title Avimelekh, just as the kings of Egypt generally assume the title Pharaoh. That's a nice insight by Kimchi, I think. Rashi in the Talmud and also Chizquni claim it is the same Avimelekh. And we're almost to the entire parsha. Look at this. So verse 10 says, Vayomer Avimelech, mazot asita lanu, ki me'ahat shachar achad ha'amet ishtecha, veheveta aleinu asham. So then Avimelech said, what is this you have done to us? For almost one of the people slept, or could have slept, with your wife. Then you would have brought upon us asham. So let's back up. Let's analyze some things in this verse. Right, Dr. Verse says it's the same behavior of Abraham and Yitzchak, like father, like son. So an article in the Journal of Biblical Literature says that one of the people, this is achad ha'am, the noun am, which we translate as people oftentimes, describing a combination of individuals, right? Just like it doesn't mean a full people, right? One of those that are around. And Rashi comments, one of the people, rather, number one of the people, i.e., the king. So the king is actually speaking in euphemisms here. I could have slept with her, but he's wanting to distance himself from the ancient wickedness. I'm very sorry, I have hiccups. Hiccups combined with coughing, goodness. Aleinu, upon us. Oh, sorry, let's do the guilt first, okay. So this word asham brought guilt upon us. The word here rendered guilt, Hebrew asham, belongs to the technical vocabulary of the cult system. Well, by the way, when we say cult, when scholars talk about cults, the cult system, they don't mean like today the word we use cult, right? Like we're not talking about Jehovah's Witnesses or something, okay? Or like a satanic cult. Well, they mean the sacrificial system as taken care of by the Levites, right? So in the cult system, asham with particular application to the unintentional commission of a sin, it can mean both the offense and its consequences. And in the mouth of Avimelech, it means we would have been subject to punishment. That's what he's saying here. He's not just saying we'd be guilty, oh well, like I'm just so virtuous. He's worried about what the gods are going to do to him. Again, remember, this was the chatul ribu, the major sin among those peoples. they weren't totally immoral. They derived certain things. People can figure out stuff, right? They knew that it's a horrible idea to sleep with another man's woman, right? It's horrible, right? They had probably seen what would happen to them when to one who did such a thing, right? They knew that it's bad to steal, right? They knew all these things. And this is why Rav Shaul says, if not for the Torah, I would not have known what sin is, because the moral code, the so-called moral code, is derivable. We can figure it out as human beings, right? Don't steal, don't rape, don't murder, right? Don't sleep with someone else's wife, right? These things are all derivable. You can figure them out in philosophy, right? But the stuff you cannot figure out, the definition of the sin that Paul is talking about, Rav Shaul, are the sins that are not obvious. For example, not charging interest when you give a loan, right? My goodness, what a wickedness we have here in the Philippines. Some of these places, the poor people, they need money for their food, and what they do, they go and they get a loan against their coming paycheck. And what do these evil businesses do? They shark them like 10% or some higher percentage, right? Monthly. Monthly. It's so wicked. In Hebrew, this word is called neshech. Neshech, it means bite, a bite. Like a nachash, well, the neshech nachash is the bite of a serpent, of a snake, right? So neshech, it's because it's eating away at the people. The people who don't need high interest loans, you know who they are? They're the poor people. But these businesses, they prey on them. So, if you are involved in one of these businesses, you need to get out of it. That is not kosher. It's not kosher. Now, I'm not saying you can't have a business that charges interest, right? Because if no business did that, it wouldn't be available for people, right? But you cannot charge an immoral interest like 10% a month or something. It's just insanity. So wicked. 1% would be correct. Maybe 2 at the most. 10 is just insane. Naomi asks, why did all the patriarchs experience famine? It's a very good question. Yeah, so there's some talk among Chazal about testing them, right? Seeing what they would do in the case of famine. The third famine, in the case of Yaakov, it's in order to force the prophecy to come true. He had to make them go down to Egypt, right? We already had Yosef HaTzadik down there, but in order to get the rest of them down, no one's going to Egypt, especially when you remember that Yitzhak was told, don't go there, right? And he probably told his son too, right? So Yaakov resists as long as possible, and only when it's very desperate, then do they go down to Egypt. So the third one is to force them. Right? Yeah, it's a good question. For certain, it's divine intervention, right? Hashem is doing it in each of their days. Okay, Aleinu, upon us, Sforno comments that when the great man of the generation is stricken, those who take shelter in his shade suffer as well. Right? So you understand? So in this case, Avimelekh is the quote unquote the great man, the king, right? He's the one who makes blessings to the quote unquote gods for the people, right? And he's the one who strategizes how to make the economy work well and all these sorts of things. And I love how Sforno uses this term shade, right? The shade. Because the Goyim, you probably notice that the Gentiles in their denominations, they oftentimes misread the verse by Rav Shaul. There's a verse where Shaul is talking about don't let someone harass you about Shabbat and about the eroti. In the Greek it says the feast days and special fast days, right? And basically it goes on to say there's all these esoteric teachings. Don't let somebody bother you about this. So I think Rav Shaul is responding to the Essenes within the movement, right? Because the Messianics, they came from all different denominations of Jews, right? And the Essenes they had a different calendar than everybody else, kind of like the Hebrew roots today, right? They had a different calendar, and they tried to force that incorrect calendar on others, And so Shaul's saying, look, don't be bothered. The Essenes, they had a high significance on constant fasting, as did the Pharisees, right? And so they try to force this on people, and Shaul saying, look, don't let them bother you about this. Many of them were vegetarians, and they tried to force this on others. So again, Shaul saying, don't let somebody bother you about this. And he goes on to say, for these things are a shadow of the soma, which in Greek is the living body of Christos, of the Messiah. right? So he's saying Yeshua is the living body, and this is the shadow of those things. And most of the English translations I've seen, they incorrectly insert a conjunction, which is not in the Greek. They say, but this is but a shadow, right? Which is just a false translation. And thank you to Brother Yehoshua in Britain. He asked this one Shabbat, and so it made us pull up the Greek, and we looked at it, and it says it's just a shadow. It's but a shadow, but the Greek does not have that in there anywhere. Instead, it's a positive. When you live in the Middle East, shadow is not a negative like people have interpreted this word in English. Okay, a shadow, the sail, is a good thing, like we have in the Psalms, the Yoshev sail, the one who dwells in the shadow of the Almighty. Right, this is a good thing. You want to be in God's shade. And the Torah is the shade that is cast from the living Torah, which makes sense. The Memra, the living Torah, the living word, casts the word. Right? So there's no negativity there, and there's no juxtaposition. There's no but in that verse. And it's interesting to see Sforno use this as the positive aspect of the great man of a generation, that he is the shade for the people. Tet says, good for climate change advocates who politicize the issue to realize famine and drought are as old as time. Yeah, very, very good point, right? I remember a few years back, we actually had expansion of the polar ice caps, which was hilarious. So, they're growing? Yeah. I believe that the reason we have this huge global effort to fight climate change is this. We are approaching end times. I don't know how close we are to it. I don't know if it's now or it's 50 years from now or 100 years from now, but it sure feels like things are accelerating to almost every believer you talk to. It's and you guys know I resist this, the idea that we're in the end times now. I resist it. So me as a skeptic, it's looking to me like, it could happen any day. Who knows? And so what the devil wants to do, his strategy, we've seen this with forced COVID immunizations where you can't go to the grocery store if you don't have a vaccination card, right? Just other ridiculous things about this disease, which is not the bubonic plague, right? It's not killing a third of people, right? It's a very specific part of the population that needs protecting, and there's ways to do that. But instead, everybody's got to, we see this movement all across the world to reduce the freedoms of individuals, to force them into compliance to a government system, to secular governments, to force them, even in Israel, largely so in Israel, this has happened under the secular government, under the leadership of Bennett, right? So, these things are, even though he's supposedly religious, I don't know, but the government has behaved very secularly. So in many, many countries all around the world, this has happened. I think the climate change is the long haul plan of the devil. So if the devil's going to get people to waste resources, to spend trillions of dollars to reduce greenhouse gases and such and hurt the economies, especially of poor countries and other countries, in order to achieve this, then by George, he's going to make sure that money is not spent on something like feeding the hungry. Right? He's not going to help humanity. He's going to make it about a BS cause like global warming, something which we can't help at all. I mean, nobody even knows these plans like the Green New Deal and all this stuff. If it happens, no one can say with any kind of certainty how much this will help. Are we going to decrease the warming trend by zero point 0.5 degrees over 100 years? Nobody knows. It's too complex of a system. It is a vastly chaotic system. Yeah, I remember when I was a child, Time magazine had a thing talking about when will the next ice age be. And everybody was horrified. I remember learning in school, the liberal teachers teaching us, there's an ice age coming. It's going to happen again. And there were links being made to pollution, all this kind of stuff. That's why, okay. So now we're on the global warming shtick. Whatever. Give me a break. Thanks for mentioning that, Ted. And even if it is happening, what can we really do about it? I mean, I don't believe in gunking up the air. When I'm in a tricycle and the tricycle is cleverly getting as close behind the jeepney as possible, so my face is turning purple from all the soot on the face from the jeepney, and we're at a red light and he just keeps creeping forward, got to get more smoke in our faces. It's like, I'm not thinking, yay, pollution. Right? I don't think anybody likes pollution. But the reason for trying to unify the world for a cause which won't help people That's why. It's because it will not help people. It'll waste resources. People are still starving, and it makes it a hardship on the poorer nations. And then there you go. So yeah, it's an interesting point. All right. Any other comments or questions? Verse 11. Vaitzav Avimelekh et kol ha'am le'emor הנוגע באיש הזה ואשתו מות יומת. Then Abimelech commanded all of the people, saying, anyone who touches, with a negative sense, this man or his wife shall be surely executed. Mot yumat, will definitely be executed. And that is the end of the Torah portion. We did it all. We did it all. Look at that, Baruch Hashem. And we've got 6 minutes left to spare, so let's look at the apostolic writings. I want to share something here. So, applying it to our lives, applying the Torah portion to our lives. And as I was thinking, what can we do to apply this? This verse range in Hebrews kind of jumped out. So I'm using the ESV translation. Oftentimes people ask me, what translation do you like? And one of the good students in one of the Hebrew literacy chats asked me this recently. What's a good translation? I just kind of nonchalantly said all translations commentary, right? It's all terrible. But for New Testament stuff, apostolic writing stuff, if I'm not looking at the Greek, I often turn to ESV. Not always, but I find ESV to be more often than the others honest and correct. So if you're looking for an English translation, I recommend ESV. I don't, sometimes Dr. Stern, because he's a brother and he's Messianic, I'll turn to his, right? I'll get his. But I find ESV is much more accurate than Stern's translation. So. All right, so the book to Messianic Jews, as Stern would call it, or the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 3 says, consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. This is for us, right? We are the Messianics, right? That's who he's talking to. Verse 4, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? So this is from Proverbs. This part I have in blue. He's quoting Proverbs. And again, the teacher addresses the students as the son. My son, do not regard lightly the musar Adonai, the discipline of the Lord. But in Hebrew, this concept musar, it's more than just discipline. This is just an approximation we get coming into Greek, coming into English. Musar is so much more. Musar is a way of life, constantly disciplining ourselves. It's about building hedges, right? Personalized hedges. When someone is very deeply steeped in musar, he makes a hedge for himself, right? So, for example, if you have had a problem with alcohol, you might decide, and I'm not being legalistic, I'm not saying do this, but you might decide that you need to avoid any of the places you used to go drinking. So you might not even take a trike past those places because you'll smell it, you'll hear the people laughing inside, right? So your personal musar might be developing a plan for yourself to avoid places that you used to frequent, right? Or if you had a problem with sleeping around, you might decide to avoid any nightclubs, any of those places where you used to meet people and hook up or something. That might be your personal musar if this is an issue. Or don't go to the malls if you used to meet people there. Whatever it is, right? You might say, or say you're an arrogant person, right? If you're arrogant, you have a problem with arrogance, lacking humility, then it might be good for you to avoid the spotlight. Don't put yourself in a position where others will praise you, or call you some kind of title that you don't deserve. Instead, you should put the musar in and protect yourself from it. Protect yourself for the sake of our own souls. Musar is more than just discipline. Musar is a way of life. And I'm hoping soon we'll have some teachings from Messianic minister Richard Cortez, who is in the Nach yearly group. He's working on some teaching materials. He's very well steeped in Musar, and he's reading the Misalat Yashar, the highway of the just, or oftentimes translated the way of the just. This is classic. It's a new book based on the classic Jewish Musar. Musar literature is very, very good for improving midot, our midot. It helps to keep us aware. Sometimes we have a problem and we're not even aware of our problem, right? It's not always easy for us to receive correction from someone else. Nobody likes it. I don't like it. I don't like it. I'm working on it. I don't like being corrected, but I'm working on it. I think we all need to improve in this area where we can be corrected by brothers and sisters. And we're told in Mishlei that a wise man will thank you for rebuke when you correct him. Recently I had this issue. I woke up, this was maybe 2 weeks ago. I woke up early in the morning. I heard the screams of a kitten. Like, there's a kitten that's outside, one of the ones that I feed. It's, it's on the property, right? It's basically my kitten. Right? It doesn't go out on the street or anything. This is maybe, I don't know, maybe he's 2 months old. Maybe 3 months. When they start to get a little bit bigger, it's in between the size of a little kitten and a full-grown cat, right? Like, I don't know, teenager cat? I don't know. Anyway, I hear screams from the kitten. Oh, I hurried, put my shoes on, looked around for my glasses, couldn't find them, kept screaming. Finally, I run out there, and I open the door from the kitchen, and I go outside to where I usually feed these guys, and on my wall, inside the jaws of a cat with a collar, so it belongs to somebody, is our kitten. It's in his jaws. And so I shoo the cat away, and I get the kitten, and he's bleeding all over my hand, and he like kind of meows, oh, kitty, and I'm trying to save him, praying for him, put pressure on the wound. But this cat had broken his trachea. He was gone very fast. It's very strange. It was someone's house cat. It had gotten out of the house and come over, right? Right on our wall. I believe it happened on the wall because there's mezuzahs on the gates. So I think this cat had a spirit, and it came up. And it's, some people I talk to, they've seen the cat before. Seems so friendly, rolling around, had a collar, right? Anyway, so I have a neighbor who's kind of a jerk. Okay. And this particular neighbor, I saw her coming up, walking around. I never see her. She's very obese. I never see her walking up the hill, right? So she's walking up the hill in front of my house. And I thought, interesting. Maybe she's looking for her cat, but I decided not to say anything to her because I don't like her and I don't want to have words, right? So the best, I just smiled and waved and went inside. And so later I asked for some advice because I took photos of the cat afterwards and I took photos of the kitten, you know, called it murderer, right? It's just so dissettling. Very rarely a male cat might do this. Like this happens with lions. A male lion might kill another lion's cubs. But this was a female cat. I could tell by her colors. When they're three colors, they're females, right? Always. And so for a female to kill another cat's kitten in a territory she doesn't go to, so I think it happened on the wall because the spirit couldn't enter past the wall, right? So I thought, do I go and confront this person? I say, hey, look, your cat is a murderer, And Richard said, do not rebuke a fool, right? And it's true. The midrash, pardon me, the midrash, the Mishlei, they teach us this, that be careful when you correct someone. If it's a non-believer or if you know the person is a fool, don't rebuke them because they will just be extremely angry about it. They're not going to love you for it. My plan was just, hey, I was thinking to be nice and say, hey, look, is this your cat? Show the photo. Yeah. Okay, this cat killed our kitten. Yeah, it broke its trachea. So just so you know, maybe you shouldn't let that cat out. And I haven't seen it too often, so I think it really is usually an indoor cat. But okay, so continue on. Verse 7, it is for discipline, for musar, that you have to endure. Musar, not just discipline. It's hard to bring into English. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline or without musar, in which all have participated, this ability to hedge the Torah, right? You understand? This Hebrew word, it's not just discipline. It's a lifestyle of building hedges for yourself to protect yourself from sin. That's what musar is. Yeah, one of the translations is discipline, okay? And it comes from yasar, which is to bind, right, or to discipline. But that's not what's happening here, right? When he talks about as a noun, as musar, the Hebrew word that's underlying what Rav Shul is talking about here, it is someone who lacks the ability to protect themselves from themselves. They do not have a way of building protocols for themselves. I'm not just talking halakha, right? Like don't shake a woman's hand, all this kind of. These are invented by the sages, and you can adopt it if you find it helpful. I'm talking about something specific for you, setting yourself up to win, making a strategy so that you don't fall in your own pit that you dug. That's what musar is. So instead of discipline, I'm just going to say musar, okay? If you're left without musar, you don't hedge the Torah, so you end up breaking the Torah, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Can you imagine what this is saying? The Apostle Paul is saying, if you do not protect God's law by having musar, if you don't safeguard yourself from falling in that pit, from falling back on your sinful ways, you are not his sons. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more? So this is kal v'chomer, Paul likes to use, light and heavy. If you respect your earthly father, how much more so be subject to the Father of spirits and live? So if you're going through a phase and you know God is punishing you, do not be angry with him. It's because you are a son or a daughter of Israel. Verse 10, for they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them. But he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. Corky asked me, I hear again, what is Musar? So Musar is hard to sum up, but to do my best to sum it up, Musar is the life practice of implementing discipline or hedges, protecting ourselves so that we walk in a certain way. It's building a hedge, a private hedge. So we know what the hedges are that the sages have invented, right? For example, on Shabbat, you don't break anything, you don't carry anything, you don't walk more than 3 Roman miles, you don't, they put hedges over the Torah, like universal hedges, right? But Musar is more about getting personal with yourself, with your own flaws, constantly building hedges to protect yourself from that bad behavior, right? So if we make a mistake and we do something that we're not pleased with, we know isn't pleasing to the Father. Say we bark at somebody, right? Or say we call someone a bad word, right? You shli mazel, or what a putz that guy is, or something like that. And you're disappointed in yourself. You build a hedge. You find a strategy to protect yourself from doing that. Maybe it means don't talk for 5 seconds after someone ticks you off, right? These are just examples. This is living with musar, right? You seek and try to find ways to hack yourself, to hack yourself so that you won't be evil. You try to protect yourself. It's not just greasy grace. Instead, it's I love God so much I don't want to sin. And I want to go the extra mile. I want to be a chess strategist. I want to lehovoto becholav. I want to love him with all my mind so that I will not sin. My mind is used for strategizing to protect myself from my own wickedness, so that he will delight in me and I will be called his son. And one day, Yeshua will call me achi, my brother. Someone asked me in private, so is musar a form of wisdom where you get more intentional in improving yourself, more of application? Yeah, very good question. Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say it's necessarily wisdom. Wisdom, chokhmah in Hebrew, if we're talking wisdom, it means many things, right? Like skill, but if we're talking, it can even mean intelligence. But if we're talking the first understanding of chokhmah, of wisdom, this is the ability to make the right choice when something happens, right? So it's not exactly musar. Musar is more of a product that a wise person would produce, right? So if chokhmah is the attribute of the person, if they have wisdom, that means something happens and they are able to make the right decision, whatever that is. The person with infinite chokhmah can always make the right choice. Captain, we're surrounded by 10 billion people and there's only 100 of us. What do? He knows the best thing to do in that instance, all right? Or you're at the restaurant and you smell something that smells like shrimp maybe in the back, right? Chokhmah, you know the right thing to do, right? You know what to do. Instinctively, you know what to do with chokhmah. Unfortunately, this comes by failing, right? You make a mistake already, and you learn not to do that again, right? You have to learn the hard way. Musar is more of a product. When a person has chokhmah, in the same way that emunah leads to bitachon, faith leads to trust and confidence in Hashem, chokhmah leads to strong musar. The person, because they are wise, they have built up hedges so they will not do those things again. You understand? Yeah, it's a good question. Corky says, Todah Rabbi, very deep. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Well, you guys are at the level now. I mean, most of you have been messianic for many years. You know the Torah, right? And so it's time for this depth. It's time for strong musar. And I'm looking forward to when our brother Richard puts out he's going to make a class from the nuggets he's learning from this book, and he's also going to a conference on some of this stuff. So looking forward to sharing that with you guys as he shares it with me. Someone writes to me in private, martial arts, discipline of the body, musar, discipline of the mind and spirit. Well put. Yeah, well put. And again, it's beyond discipline, right? You are disciplined, but it's like, if any of you have ever done calculus, this is like the integral, right? It's like the next level, right? So when you integrate velocity, you get acceleration, right? That's the result of integrating it, right? So when you integrate discipline, you get musar, right? It's like the accelerated discipline. It's the part that produces the discipline. That's what musar is. It's not just discipline. It's a self motivation to produce new discipline as required. Yeah. Verse 11, for the moment all discipline, all musar, let's say again, all musar seems painful rather than pleasant. But later it yields the peaceful fruit of tzedek, righteousness, to those who have been trained by it. Verse 12, therefore lift your drooping hands. He's using all this biblical language, right? Like, again, Mishlei, the Proverbs that he quoted, it warns about the sluggard, how he lets his hands rafah, fall to his side. And you just do that for a moment and boom, on comes poverty instantly. So there's all this beautiful stuff that Paul is doing in the Hebrew when you kind of backtrace it in the Hebrew, or if you're familiar with the wisdom literature. It's really, really brilliant. And strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet. By strengthening the weak knees is a play on words here. So barkayim is knees in Hebrew, but berachot are blessings, right? The idea is if your knees are weak, you won't have any kind of financial success. You're not doing good work. It's kind of idiomatic about someone who doesn't put out any effort, like a sluggard. But the opposite of that, from the same root, is blessings, material blessings, progeny, etc. Verse 13, and make straight paths for your feet. Straight paths. Look at that. This is the derech hayashar, like a straight path. This is the path that Yeshua talks about that not many people find. Remember, we've been mentioning the hologos in the Greek. A me'at me'at, only very few will be saved. They'll be on that straight path. So that what is lame, meaning you have a problem with your leg, your knees, may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. Strive for shalom with everyone, and for the kedushah, the holiness, without which no one will see Adonai. And how do we get holy? We obey the holiness code in Leviticus. We obey all those things that make us different than most people. We control what we eat. We control how we dress. We control how we interact with the opposite sex. We control what we allow our eyes to see. We control what we put in our body, trying to treat our bodies as truly the Heichal Hashem, the Beit HaMikdash, the living temple, so that we might be, and this is amazing, Yeshua in the Gospel of Mark, I've been reading through the Greek in that lately, and Yeshua refers to the word korban when he says bring your gift, korban, and the Apostle Paul does this also. They didn't know how to translate it into Greek. There wasn't a Greek equivalent. In Greek, it says korban, right? It's written with Greek letters, right? So this concept of being a sacrifice, a living sacrifice, it entails so much. A person who is a proper korban is one who is holy, one who is pure, one who has proper musar to make sure that he stays this way, and one who is on the right path, living with tzedek, with righteousness or justice. The Hebrew word for righteous means justice. It means justice. That is another meaning, because to be righteous, you are a person who is just, meaning you apply the law in your life and you apply it to others in your interactions. Verse 15, see to it that no one fails to obtain the chesed of Elohim. This is the clan loyalty, the loving kindness of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. That no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau. See, this is interesting. So when I was telling you about how he was sexually immoral, how he raped a woman who was betrothed to someone else, we were reading this in the Talmud today, remember? And you're probably thinking, oh, come on, Rabbi, you're just loving your ancestor Jacob, our ancestor Jacob, too much, right? Here it's confirmed by Paul that Esau was sexually immoral and unholy. So enough of this saying that Jacob, our ancestor, was the one who was usurper and all this stuff. Esau was not fit to sit on the throne. He was not fit to sire the Messiah. He was immoral sexually. He did this horrible thing to someone. And he was an unholy person who sold his birthright for a single meal. And finally, verse 17, Rabotai, for you know that afterward, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected. For he found no chance to make teshuvah, though he sought it with tears. Avimelekh, our Father, our King, Todah lecha, לדבריך Adonai. תודה לך, כי אנחנו יכולים ללמוד את שמך, כי אנחנו יודעים אותך, אדוני. אין לנו מושיע מגן בלך, אדוני, רק אתה. אנחנו אוהבים אותך בכל לבבינו, אדוני. אנחנו רוצים ללכת טוב בעיניך. תעזרנה אותנו, אדוני, ללמוד מוסר טוב, כי אנחנו יכולים להיות קורבניים בעיניך. כי אתה תקרא אותנו בניך. בכל הדברים האלה אנחנו נברכך בזכות ישוע המשיח. Our Father, thank you so much that we're able to study your word. We're so grateful. Please help us all as the week goes forward and the days go forward, that we might learn to study Musar, that we might learn to apply Musar in our own life, so that we might be able to be considered korbanim in your eyes, that each of us could be a korban, a living sacrifice, and that we might be able to be called by you, my children. For all of these things we give you praise and thanks by the merit of Yeshua the Messiah. Okay, Shavuot Tov, everyone. Have a great week. All right.
Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov. 6:29. Woo!
Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov.
Shavuot Tov, Rabbi. Toda.
Shavuot Tov.
תודה.
Very welcome.
תודה רבה, רביי.
Bevakasha. Bevakasha.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well, guys.
שלום.
Shalom. Hey, this is the end of this Drosh segment. Thanks for watching. Please support this ministry if you'd like to stand with us financially. You can visit patreon.com at the address on the screen and sign up for a monthly or one-time donation. We would be very thankful for having your support. And join the conversation at t.me/messianic-chat. All kinds of chats about messianic topics happen over there with over 50 people. All glory to Adonai. Kol kavod l'Adonai.